Welcome back. Good afternoon. It's time for session 3. We're at Voices 2023, coming to you live from the English countryside here in Oxfordshire. Welcome to all of you watching online in 100 countries around the world. It was Alan Turing, as we heard yesterday, who asked, if a machine can think, it might think more intelligently than we do. And then where should we be? It's a question we are still grappling with over 70 years later, and even more so now that artificial intelligence, the most consequential technological shift since the dawn of the internet, has exploded into our collective consciousness. Generative AI is the single most significant platform transition in computing history. In the last 40 years, nothing has been this big. It's bigger than the PC, it's bigger than mobile, and it's gonna be bigger than the internet by far. Those are the words of NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang at Microsoft's Ignite event last week. And as we heard during yesterday's talks, there are differing opinions on what all of this technological advancement and development means. So, it's not all doom and gloom. And in a first at BOF Voices, we are dedicating the entire technology and innovation session to focus exclusively on understanding, exploring, and debating the potential of artificial intelligence. Our speakers will share the challenges as well as the opportunities that AI presents for fashion, tech, and the world at large. And we will meet designers, entrepreneurs, executives, even songwriters channeling AI into their creative practices and businesses to address real-life problems and explore untapped opportunities. This isn't a one-way dialogue. We want to hear from all of you throughout the session. Please introduce yourselves in the chat window. Tell us where you're coming from. And during the session and afterwards, share your feedback, questions, photos, and reactions using the hashtag BOFVoices. As we learned earlier, fashion executives are obsessed with AI, which has already had a profound impact on manufacturing, sales, and the customer experience. 73% of the fashion executives surveyed for our annual report on the state of fashion said that generative AI will be a top business priority next year. As Chief Data Officer at LVMH Group, Anca Marola leverages big data and AI as she works to transform the luxury giant's business across more than 75 maisons. She's here to give us a glimpse into what AI means for savoir-faire, client relationships and design, and how LVMH is implementing AI across its brand arsenal. Please join me in welcoming the wonderful Anca Marola to the Voices stage.
Thank you, Imran. It's very nice to be here. It's a big honor after the amazing speakers of this morning. So maybe just a bit of words about myself before I jump into the marvelous topic of AI. So I'm actually born and bred in Romania. This is a picture of baby Anca, fashionable in post-communist Romania. So I've been starting my career there working on yogurt, and one day I read this quote saying, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And I said to myself, what the hell am I doing working on yogurt? I don't care about yogurt, I love fashion. So fast forward, I ended up in the epicenter of luxury and fashion in Paris, Avenue Montaigne, at LVMH, where I'm working for the past 10 years across all of our brands in digital and data AI transformation. And I'm here today to share with you the learnings of this journey. So the first and most important learning is that it's not about technology. We don't care in luxury and fashion about all of the servers and all of the pipes of the data and AI. But what we do care about is customer experience. That is very important to us. And the way we are doing this today is profoundly changing due to artificial intelligence. So we have all spoken about generative AI this entire year, but actually these breakthroughs, these big breakthroughs occurred only in the past few months. And in these months, it's already projected to impact massively the economy. So it's supposed to add as much billions of euros as the GDP of the UK, for example. And that's not even taking into account the vintage AI, as we call it, which is the machine learning that we use to do in forecasting and so on. That's even bigger. So the size of the opportunity is tremendous. And this is now really changing the way we do business. And sometimes when people think about AI in our world, they think about all of this far out innovation and gimmicky things that we might do. But actually, where it adds the biggest value, it's in our core business. It's throughout the luxury value chain. So I'm here to explain today, I was tasked to explain today, what is it exactly that we can do with AI. So where we've seen the biggest impact is from design and product development up to the very end where it reaches our customers in customer relationship management, after sales services. So it's really throughout, but it's really in some specific areas of value. For example, in design and product development, it's not so much about designing. It's really an aid to creation and operationalizing that product development in a way that's more efficient and faster in its time to market. So for example, with generative AI, you can now speed up the prototyping phase, going from a drawing to a 3D print. So that is quite a big change in the time to market that you can have. It's also about getting all of the social listening trends and resurfacing those as inspiration for the designers, but also more in the costing side, as an example. Going afterwards in the supply chain and merchandising, you can imagine that a company may have 10,000 SKUs, all colors, all sizes, and you have so many different stores all around the world. So it's very hard to really accurately predict by a human what are the precise quantities. And this is where AI and machine learning can really help you scale that and have much more precision. So it's really about optimization. Going into the brand communications, we've heard the importance of building our brands via powerful storytelling, but that requires media investment. And we do invest a lot of budget into making this very visible. But unfortunately, budget is not unlimited for anyone, as much as we might like. So this is where precision targeting, precision advertising comes into play. Target the right people and make your budget as efficient as possible. And then it's also about measurement. And where Gen AI is really changing the game today is content generation. It's a huge, massive impact. It's predicted that a lot of the content in the future will be generated with the help of AI, not necessarily only by AI, but aided by AI. And that can really improve the cost of production and allow us to create more engaging experiences. In the stores and services, we also have some core applications. We can have personalization. When you go on the e-commerce website, every single person in this room should have a personalized experience, right? Because you don't like the same things and you don't have the same style. So you should see what is relevant to you personally. We can also have customer service that is being optimized thanks to AI, either by pre-writing, for example, parts of the information for the customer, or even with chatbots that used to be not so good, but now it's really improving a lot. And then in customer relationship management is where we see a huge amount of value that's being created. So it's about how do you empower the stores with predictive analytics? How do you detect the right time to speak to a customer with the right product recommendation, content that's relevant to them? So it's really about making it more relevant and optimizing operations. So going into some concrete examples, bringing them to life. Design and product development. So I didn't bring my bag here just to brag, although it is a limited edition. But it's because it has over 130 pieces to produce it. So it's an absolute nightmare to cost the cost of production of this item. And when we know that there's so many prototypes that never see the light of day, and this process can be quite long, optimizing it with a more accurate forecast can be really a time saver and much more efficient. So for example, today our teams have an algorithm that scroll across 10 years of history of PDFs and give them the accurate prediction of how much the product will cost. And it's no longer taking them 2 weeks of doing this manually, it's taking them 2 minutes. So it really improved their lives and the accuracy. moving on to customer relationship management. It is very powerful when we apply personalization and when we tailor our speech to the customer, because we are overexposing customers to messages all day long. And when you think of our client advisors in stores, you have about, let's say, 500 or more customers to manage by client advisor. That's a lot of people to know on a personal level. You may know some of them that shop very often, but you don't know the rest. So this is where AI and predictive algorithms can tell you who's the right person to talk to today, what they might like when they come to the store. Helps you prepare that experience to be more relevant. And when we do this, we see a huge impact on the sales and average order value. And this is a number that I love because it's quite generic. Actually, every time you apply AI and machine learning to any process or operation you have, it generally tends to have at least 30% improvement, no matter what you're doing. It's just something I've noticed. I don't know how to explain it. It's just the way it is. But it's a rule of thumb that we have noticed a lot. Brand communications. So we have tested out, for example, lookalike targeting. Lookalike targeting means you're looking at the customers that you have, and you're trying to find people who are more likely to act like your customers and be your customers of the future. When we do this, we can even double the efficiency of our media spending. So of course, there's issues relatable to scalability, but it's a very powerful tool to better manage your budget. In the stores and services side, we used to have, for example, chatbots. Honestly, they weren't very qualitative. Everyone hates chatbots. It's not very human. But in some cases, it is true that customers don't always want to talk to a real person. Sometimes they do want to just browse by themselves, but with a bit of help. And nowadays, they have become quite qualitative. You can have more advanced conversations thanks to the ChatGPT and like type of models that can really help you find the right product for you to address your skin concern, to address your taste, and really go beyond that standard FAQ type of conversation that you used to have before. So it's something that everyone is testing right now to be seen, but it's something that shows a lot of potential that can now be used even for your own employees, actually, a lot. So in fashion, we say that less is more. But with data and AI, we say that more is more. The more data that you have, the more powerful your predictions are. And so today, constructing your data and treating your data like a strategic company asset is very important. 80% of the time of a project, you spend it looking for data across the company. You don't know where it is. And when you find it, you realize it's not that qualitative, so you need to fix it. So 80% of the work is really done on that gold mine that is your data. So taking care of your data and treating it strategically is something of the future. Companies are even buying other companies today because of the data, or they are doing data alliances. So it's very important nowadays to treat it strategically. So before I go, I like to leave you with this image, which is, to me, where we are right now in time. We're at the tipping point, a real tipping point with AI. The fax machine, everyone used to use it. And when the internet and the emails came, everyone used them. So no one stayed and wanted to use absolutely the fax machine. And this is where we are today with the AI. I think it's very important that we adapt to this new world and we treat it like a real assistant and a complement to our team. And it's really helping us become much more efficient. So I did start the talk by saying that it's not about the technology, but it is about the people with the technology. And to me, that's the future. Thank you very much.
Anca, I have a couple questions for you before you rush off.
With Imran, it's always tricky.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you for doing that. And you are the first speaker to finish under your time slot.
Oh, wow. Never happened.
I had the opportunity to speak at the LVMH Data Summit earlier this year, and it was incredible just to hear all of the different things that are happening inside that massive, gargantuan organization. I wanted to double click on the design point. You know, you said just now that on the creative side, it was more about optimizing the production process, understanding costing. What is happening at LVMH brands in the actual design portion, which is the thing that I think most people are like really worried about or concerned about or asking themselves is like, can AI technology be used in the can AI technology be used in the design process? Could a Celine handbag be designed using or being assisted by AI, for example?
I think it's the first time in history that we ask ourselves that question. Because before generative AI blew up and really had these breakthrough innovations, we were convinced that it would never be helpful for the design process. And when we've seen the power of a Mid-Journey, for example, and ChatGPT, we started just asking the question, which is something new.
Yeah.
And then, personally, I was convinced that no one is aware. So I started talking to designers, and they actually, all of them were aware. They knew these tools much better than other people. They were already testing them out. So the way they use it is for inspiration. They don't necessarily use it in the actual process when they start working, but they use it at the very beginning of their thinking. And then they use it also to iterate fast their ideas. For example, maybe I designed those shoes, but I would like the sole to be yellow. What does it look like? Oh, no, I don't like it. Okay, so it's really helping them iterate and bringing their own ideas to life much faster. So this is what we've seen today. And actually, it's quite embraced in a way in the mindset of people. And we see, for example, the younger designers, they are always very curious and they're testing out. So I think it's going to be part of the way we work, but not necessarily replacing it. We'll never replace, but it will definitely be at the inspiration stage and then at fast prototyping.
That makes sense. There are some jobs that must be under threat by this kind of technology. Like what jobs do you think are most at risk within our very vast sector? And what jobs do you think are kind of insulated from the AI impact?
I would say that basically what AI is doing is automating low-value tasks. It just happens that in our industry, I've never seen packed teams, overstaffed teams. We tend to be understaffed. So in a way, we've never had the case where we've put AI and we have no longer need for a person. So it's always been helpful for them because it helped them really focus their energy on the strategic piece and creative piece rather than that tedious task that they had to do. Of course, therefore, for the future, it does mean that all of the skills like empathy, communication, interpersonal relationships, those things that you can never replace that are so valuable, those will be skills of the future. And I think it's much less about learning how to do repetitive things very well.
Okay.
And learning how to work with the machines. We've seen it even, for example, in warehouses. It's not about the person having less people. It's about having the person work with the machine in a different way. So they have to learn how to do it. So I would say it's working with the machine as well that is a skill of the future.
Okay. My big takeaway from your talk, which is the thing I remembered from the AI summit, is this 30% rule. You know how you have the Pareto rule? I'm going to call that the Anca rule from now on, which is AI can improve things by 30%
Yes.
more. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye. We wanted to also share with you a little bit of the work that we at BOF have been doing in the AI space. No company in the world should be sitting on their laurels just watching all of this happen. The best way to learn is to do. And so our team at BOF Insights has been working with an AI company called Quilt AI to understand how businesses can convert data into cultural insights. Anca was just saying the quality of your data, the kind of quantity and quality of your data is what really, really plays a role in determining the insights you can draw from it. So in September, we launched something called the BOF Brand Magic Index. It ranks 50 global luxury and fashion brands using Quilt AI's proprietary tech based on tens of thousands of social media posts. It was our first step at using AI to solve a set of common industry problems, including and especially a lack of measurement tools that accurately quantify social media impact. This challenge will only become greater as companies expand their digital footprints and social media users increasingly determine and control brand narratives. Our goal with the index was to see if customers see a brand in the same way a brand sees itself, and in doing so, evaluate a brand's marketing efforts on a holistic level. Here to give you a little bit of understanding into our BOF Brand Magic Index is Anurag Banerjee, the co-founder and CEO of Quilt AI, and Rahul Malik, our Managing Director of North America and the head of BOF Insights.
Thank you, Imran. My name is Rahul Malik, and I'm fortunate at the Business of Fashion to oversee BOF Insights, which is the newest team at BOF and is an advisory team that works with leading brands in fashion, in beauty, and in luxury. And for the past year, my team has been working very closely with a company called Quilt AI, a company founded by Anurag, my co-presenter today. And the question that's animated us, the question that we've been collectively trying to answer over the past year is how can we use artificial intelligence to measure the human connections that brands seek to create and nurture with their customers. Fashion, beauty, luxury, these are industries with art and creativity at their core. I don't need to tell any of you that we all live that. Brands at the forefront of these industries spend billions collectively to disseminate and communicate that creativity. But the challenge that they grapple with is how best to measure the effectiveness of their spend. At a time when brands spend more than ever on marketing and do so across a growing number of social media platforms and do so, as Imran said, at a time when customers, far more than the brand, control the brand narrative and do so in a really volatile and dynamic way on social media on an hourly, daily, and weekly basis. How can we empower executives to best know when customers see a brand the way that they see the brand themselves? What we've developed is something that we call brand magic. Brand magic is our attempt to have a quantifiable, trackable tool that measures that effectiveness using AI, as Anurag will shortly explain. Our goal is to measure what we see as the distance between brands and their customers. And we do that by evaluating all of the marketing content and collateral that brands put out in the world on a daily basis, but also evaluating all of the user-generated content that follows, that customers post in response. Magical brands seem to be in almost perfect lockstep with the culture and with their customers. And brand magic is our tool to explain why. So in a second, I'll hand it over to Anurag to explain the science behind what we do. But I wanted to introduce the language that we use when talking about brand magic. Behind me are 12 archetypes, first developed by the social psychologist Carl Jung. These archetypes will, of course, be very familiar to you all because they encapsulate a shared set of motivations, ideals, and values that animate us. All of you looking at these archetypes behind me, I'm sure see some that you feel characterize you today, see some that you wish would characterize you in the future. Our thesis is that a really effective way to describe how brands manifest, not just to themselves, but also in the minds of their customers, is by using these archetypes. And so now I'll hand it over to Anurag to walk through the science behind what we've been working on.
Thank you, Rahul. Our intent and mission at Quilt AI is to index and interpret the internet. Our thesis is that culture lives and moves on the internet. We've built machines using a combination of anthropologists, semioticians, mathematicians, and AI scientists to essentially convert the internet into a set of meaning. Our meaning exists on the internet in various formats. Written information exists as essays, as tweets, as journalism, good and bad, and we've built machines to extract meaning and nuance across more than 100 languages. So we study things like ennui, boredom, loneliness, happiness, joy, irony, and even sometimes British sarcasm. Culture also exists visually. Your industry, the fashion industry, is intensely visual. But what does visual mean beyond an Instagram like, or a TikTok follow, or a view, or a set of hashtags that you put out there? Visuals allow us to go inside somebody's life. They allow us to become voyeurs into their existence. It allows us to understand how people love, eat, shop, buy, and travel. Over the last 5 years, we built engines to take this insight that's on multiple platforms, American and Chinese, and generate insights from there. That core capability then got used by Rahul and his really nice team to build a sender and a receiver model. So we took 50 brands and we created the first data set. So data set 1 had all the content that these brands put out on multiple online platforms over a period of 3 months. So it was a snapshot in time just before September, as Imran mentioned. And the second set of data was all the declared consumers of that brand were then mapped. And we took these two data sets, we spun them up into mathematical space, and we measured the proximal distance between what a brand said and what their consumer said. And the reason we did that, the proximity between sender and receiver, is important. When you say something and you are understood, there is fit, there is harmony, there is music, and we believe there is magic. Before I go into fashion and share the index, I did want to reacquaint you with two iconic brands, Coca-Cola and Fanta. Now, for the next 15 seconds, as you think about these brands, I want you to think about and consider the following questions. When was the last time you had a Coke or a Fanta, right? What time of day was it? Were you happy or sad, or just bored or hungry? Who were you with? What were you feeling? You sat with that? All right. Now I'm going to show you a Coke ad. Coke is an incredible brand, and it has built its entire brand message around the concept of being magical. It is magical in all the magical moments that exist in our lives. And because we have so many magical moments during the course of a day, Coke has permission and opportunity and encouragement to play in all those spaces. And that results in incredible alignment. So as Rahul talked about the archetypes, this is an archetype wheel. And in the archetype wheel, there are two things happening here. In red are the sender communication. So what Coke has put out into the universe on digital platforms. In blue, which is subsumed as purple now, are what the consumer feels in return and says in return. This amount of alignment is eerily epic. And it's eerily epic because the consumer is embraced by the communication that the brand has. This kind of fit is almost impossible to execute to, which explains why it's been an enduring brand for decades, and Mr. Buffett considers it a great investment. Fanta. Fanta plays in the space of what might be indulgence. Over decades, it's been something you indulge in. And indulgence, as all of you know better than I do, has evolved so much over the last few years and decades. And that has led to a challenge because indulgence doesn't give permission to a drink, Fanta or otherwise, to engage in and own that space completely. And that leads to low alignment. But we had the Gap and the Mattel conversation earlier today, and that's fantastic because these are snapshots in time. As brands, you will be out of alignment sometime, and you can pivot and come back into alignment and come back into that fit. You can be culturally irrelevant to leading culture in some shape or form. And Fanta, and there's some elements coming out in the next few months, you will see there's this massive push towards becoming fundamentally more aligned with where culture is headed. And I'm going to give it back to Rahul to bring it home for fashion.
Thank you. So as Imran mentioned, in early September, we published the first iteration of the BOF Brand Magic Index powered by Quilt AI. And of course, as Anurag was just emphasizing, this first iteration of the index was deliberately just a point-in-time snapshot based on 3 months of data. And the reason is fashion, like many businesses, is a seasonal business. Brands reinvent themselves or emphasize who they already are on a recurring basis through campaigns, through the fashion season calendar. And so we expect and anticipate that a ranking like this will change over time. In fact, that's the point. That brand magic, that alignment is something you can influence. It's something you can own. It's something that as an executive, you have the agency to change. What's interesting, though, is Anurag was sharing the spider charts that visually depict alignment. What we did for the purposes of the index was distill that chart, distill that analysis into one number. So that number, the number you see here, represents the distance between that red plot and the blue plot, the brand plot and the customer plot. And that lets us not just understand how aligned a brand might be with its customers, but it lets us also compare alignment of one brand versus its competitive set. And what's interesting in this ranking here is some brands, of course, are very aligned, and we measure that alignment in the 90s out of 100. Some brands are rather misaligned, and their alignment is in the 50s and the 60s. I'll come back to the brands that top the index to explain why, but I wanted to share one additional analysis that we did. Behind me is a very wonky 2x2 chart, but it's instructive, and it's because what we did was compare the scale of a brand's following with their alignment. And so on the y-axis, up and down, is how many followers follow a brand across different social media platforms. And that's a really useful proxy for just the volume of conversation that's happening about a brand. And on the x-axis is the alignment as we measured it. And each of the bubbles corresponds to one of the 50 brands in our index. There are no labels, and partly that's because the insight is that there really isn't much correlation. And the point is that brand magic alignment isn't just a function of how often people talk about you. It's a measurement of how clear they are when talking about you, the quality of that conversation. What's interesting when looking at the 3 brands that top this first iteration of the index is, I think, how different they actually are. I don't think, for those of us who work in fashion, we mention Miu Miu and Armani in the same breath that often. And the point is that brand magic isn't some evaluation of what's hot. It's an evaluation of what's clear. And if you think about those 2 brands, you think about Miu Miu, the Prada Group has been investing millions to back a social media strategy that I think surfaces and prioritizes a very rebellious type of individuality that's clearly been well received by its customers. And you think about Armani, a company and a brand that's been unfailingly consistent, not just over months and years, but really over decades. And you see that for very different reasons, 2 brands like that can be so aligned. I wanted to leave you with a question, which is, alignment is both a global and a local concept. So what we have here is the alignment of Armani as we measured it in the index, and we measure this globally. I'm pulling data from Instagram, from TikTok, from Weibo, from YouTube, and Reddit. And this alignment, of course, varies and should vary. It varies by geography, it varies by demographic, by age, by gender. It even varies by how a brand manifests on a particular social media platform. That is the work that we do with brands in helping them to understand their alignment as it manifests in all of these different local concepts. And so the question I want to leave you all with is, do your customers see your brand the way you see that brand, the way you see yourself? Because when they do, that's magic. Thank you.
Some of you will be participating in a salon later this evening where we're going to double click on that. So stay tuned. Now we're going to move on to the world of advertising and how AI is transforming the space of advertising. Back in May, I was at the Cannes Lion Advertising Festival. I had the pleasure of speaking at WPP Stream. Just before I got on stage, WPP's CEO, Mark Reed, and the NVIDIA CEO, Jensen Huang, had a conversation that kind of blew my mind, showing how the entire advertising industry is being upended by generative AI. Afterwards, someone tapped me on the shoulder, and we began a months-long conversation about AI and advertising. That someone was Mariam Chahin, a global director at Microsoft, which has been an industry leader in the creation of generative AI tools, especially via the company's investment in the world's leading AI company, OpenAI. Today, Mariam will be joined by Rachel Higham, the Chief Information Officer at WPP, the creative transformation company which owns the likes of Ogilvy and Group M and Kantar and AKQA and any number of other agencies that you will all be familiar with. They are here to explore AI, and the future of advertising. And this will blow your mind.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Imran. So I'm going to kick off where Anca actually left off. Great presentation. I love what you guys are doing at LVMH. But the fax machine. Fax machine is predominantly obsolete, but the need to communicate is not. And so the what remains the same, what we want to achieve, but the technology and the way we're doing things and the way we've done things over time has evolved. And so it's the same in advertising, where advertising is about bringing the consumer and the brand closer together, giving the brand a voice and the opportunity to build a relationship with consumers. That's never changed and probably will never change. But how we do that has evolved over time, and probably generative AI has been one of the greatest disruptors of the way we do that. Who here thinks AI is going to take our jobs? Okay, well, no doubt you were going to raise your hand. Okay, so I would personally love AI to take a big portion of my day. If I can never get on Excel again, I will be a much happier individual, a better friend, and definitely a better parent. And I think that will happen. I think there are bits of our jobs that AI does better than us. So artificial intelligence, or AI, is pattern recognition, to be able to do something that the human would do, except do it quicker and more efficiently. And if it is a task that can be done better by the computer than by a human, why not give it to the computer to do and free your time up? And this we call a low empathy task, a task that requires very little human interaction. On the other end, though, and what generative AI has done, which I personally think could be a superpower if applied correctly and responsibly, is what we call augmentation and a high empathy task. And this is where I think the conversation Imran and Anca had at the end is really interesting. So in design, will AI take your job? No, but it can become your co-pilot. There are aspects of the creative process that cannot be taken away by the machine, but can certainly be augmented by it. And so Rachel and I are here to talk about three things that we believe, three ways we believe generative AI has augmented advertising. So there are the 3 Ps. Can you tell we come from marketing? So it's prompting, personalization, and new possibilities. So Rachel, starting with prompting, can you tell us first of all, what is prompting for those who don't know? And what place does it have in advertising?
Well, prompting is the instructions we give to a data model to get insights and the outcomes we're looking for. And what we've found since we've been experimenting with this since the beginning of January is that it is a refinement loop. It does require the human and the machine to work in partnership and to go through an iterative process where the human is learning how to give the instructions in the right way to get the right outcome. What you see behind me on the screen is not a real human, it's not a real polar neck, it's not a real mountain range. It's certainly not real snow. All of it has been completely generated from hundreds of thousands of images that we've trained a model on. And you can see at the bottom of the image the prompt that was required to create the image. That prompt took 8 iterations. It wasn't a one hit and done. It was an experimentation process, a lot of curiosity, a lot of playing. But if you can read the font, and it's quite small on the screen, it captures the focal length, the lens you should use, the shutter speed, the aperture. You have to have gone through an experience of being a photographer or an art director to be able to craft that prompt and iterate it and work it in partnership to get that quality of image out of it. And that's why we believe that generative AI won't replace our creatives. It will be a tool that makes them superhuman, it makes them more efficient, helps them explore more possibilities.
So it doesn't really take away the craft of being a photographer.
It doesn't, but I think as we look at art directors and photographers now interacting with a model as opposed to going out into a location and shooting, I do wonder how might we create the new prompt engineers of the future if they haven't gone into the field and spent hours and hours and hours with a camera in their hands and understanding what it takes to produce an image of this kind of quality.
This is great. I think we'll now share a video. Do you want to talk a little bit about the next thing we're going to share in the prompting space?
So we've been using and experimenting with different types of prompts and also using it to create commercial outcomes for our clients. So this is a piece of work we're going to show now that we created for Nestlé. And they were interested to take the iconic Dutch painting by Vermeer of a milkmaid and extend it. Because when you look at the original masterpiece, it's quite a tight frame of a milkmaid with a churn. We wanted to extend the frame to create a story around the scene that surrounded that milkmaid that would fit in with their advertising outcome. To do that, our engineers had to use over 130 different prompts. And the video will show you how the iterative process happened, how that refinement loop happened, because every single sort of square centimetre or so was provided as a set of options that a human had to say, yes, that fits into the narrative I want to tell in the expanded scene. Let's take a look.
Great, let's take a look. I love this, but over 100 prompts. What is the advice you would give, or what's the journey of prompting? I can feel like by my fourth prompt, I'll just, like, come on, just get it.
Yeah, you have to be very forgiving, and you have to see it as a true partnership between you creating the prompt and the feedback you get and the output you get from the model. This is not a perfect technology. I mean, we're used to technology being, perfectly shrink-wrapped. You can't even take this thing apart. It works, it's very intuitive, it requires very little training. That is not the case with generative AI. You have to be a specialist. You have to understand the sort of legacy version of the craft that you're trying to use a generative AI model to create. And you have to experiment and you have to learn your way through. You have to grow and learn together with the model, which is quite an interesting concept because we are used to things coming to us fully formed and just being able to get an outcome. That's not the case here. It's
I love it. I love the culture of forgiveness in everything, but also with technology and especially with generative AI. So moving on to the second piece, personalization. Personalization has been the biggest topic of conversation in advertising since the digital explosion. So I find it very interesting that now we live in a world where personalization used to be about distribution of content, and now we're evolving into a world of generating content for you. So instead of me distributing content for you, I now have a second brain or a co-pilot to help me generate content with you in mind. How do you see that evolving, and what kind of fun are you guys doing?
Well, until January this year, being able to personalize was highly manually intensive. It required vast amounts of data. It required a deep understanding of the context, the market, the audience segments, the cultural nuances of where we wanted to place a product. And it took weeks and weeks and weeks and very large teams to be able to personalize. So it was very much reserved for higher value products and services rather than commodity. Now what we're seeing is that we can shift the burden of personalization to the person who's going to consume the content. So we can have you be the prompter. We can take the data science away and make that a very simple process. But we can hyper-personalize at a very, very low cost point now. We can do that not just with text, but also with static images and moving images and sound. And this example, I think, brings that to life. So this is a piece of work we did for Virgin Galactic Cruises, where you input your name, you input the occasion that you wish to celebrate.
Hello, Catherine. Jennifer Lopez here, Virgin Voyage's Chief Celebration Officer. Christian told me you deserve to celebrate an anniversary with a voyage, so get on board. Let's take a look around the ship. Bubbles and sparkles, baby.
So I personally think they picked JLo just so it could be called Gen AI.
It was exactly
as
that
a
reason.
project.
There aren't many Jennifers of world renown.
No, yeah. So what was personalized in this video?
So first of all, we filmed the basic scene, and a lot of the content is very similar. The only pieces you personalize are the injection of the name of the person who's sending the invitation, the occasion that you're celebrating, and the name of the guest that you're sending this invitation to. And those elements of the video are spliced into the exact frame with the sound overlay. At the moment, those words are pronounced.
And so JLo is created at scale for whoever. So this is true one-to-one advertising, but generated many times versus being distributed many times through a linear process.
And only generated in the moment that the user is asking for it, as opposed to pre-canned and being ready to load. So it's true demand-based personalization.
I think there's never been a more exciting time to be in advertising. And with generative AI, it really collapses creativity with execution. So what you can, imagination with execution. And so our last piece is new possibilities. So a world where you can imagine things like, oh, I wish I could do this, or imagine this, or imagine that. Technology can now deliver that for you. Or with the help of technology, can help you augment or help you deliver that. So this last piece is super exciting. What are we about to see?
So we were asked by Nike to help them celebrate their 50th anniversary. And they have a very long history of having athletes wear their clothing and measuring data and the performance of that clothing to then improve the performance of it for the general public and as they take their products onto the high street. They wanted to go large with that idea and see if they could build a model that represented the performance of one of the greatest of all time athletes. Not just where they are now, but actually capture their journey, understand how they mastered each element of the craft that went into their sport, and how they maintained that not just over years, but over decades. And so our team came up with the idea of, well, let's pick a role model athlete. Could we have them play against their younger version of themselves and compare and contrast the playing style, see who wins out? So let's take a look.
Since its beginning, Nike applied data from athletes to innovate its products, helping everyone to perform faster, higher, stronger, more accurate, and free. But what does it take to master all skills, to stay on top not for years, but for decades? Under Nike's 50th anniversary, we studied the greatest athlete of all time, the one that stood on top for more than 20 years, and transformed this data into a live entertainment event. This is Never Done Evolving, featuring Serena from 1999, the year she won her first Grand Slam, against Serena from 2017, the year she won her 23rd Grand Slam. Based on archival footage, machine learning was able to model each era's playing style. Decision-making, shot selection, reactivity, recovery, and agility. The virtual match was created by building on the bid-to-player technique developed by Stanford University. The result was seeing both Williams play herself in 130,000 games.
We're all extremely passionate about sport. When we look at the data we capture, there's beauty in that. The lines and curves, it's like a symphony.
The game was launched as a live event, narrated by Josh Appel, tennis main narrator during Serena's era.
In tennis, there are no bigger dream matches than this one. One Grand Slam title against 23 Grand Slam titles.
I love this. So who do you think won? Who won? Who won? Who thinks Serena then won? So younger Serena, 17-year-old Serena.
Oh,
no.
Strikeouts.
Wow. Who thinks 35-year-old Serena won? Who won, Rachel?
Older Serena. Yeah, it was 6'4", 3'6", 6'4".
I mean, I love this example. I think it's absolutely mind-blowing and just the perfect poster child for just sit in a room and imagine brainstorming and going, imagine if we could. And now there are technologies that can help you do that. And actually, when I tapped Imran's shoulder, it was that. I'm like, oh my God, there's so much we could be doing. So,
but that was still a very long project. So it took a year to create that. It was a huge piece of data science. At the beginning of the project, 3 of the 7 AI models we used to create the outcome didn't exist. We had to commission 2 from Stanford University, and we had to create one ourselves. So these things are still not simple. That didn't come from a prompt. That came from a very large team of engineers.
It wasn't ChatGPT?
It wasn't ChatGPT. No, maybe next year. Who knows? It's exploding fast.
So we need the human.
We do need the human, and we need that initial spark, that initial idea, the creativity, and then the persistence to see through a year-long project of data science to produce an outcome like that.
It's phenomenal, and what we're going through is amazing. And I say there are no experts, there's only experience in this space. What advice do you have for people to, just to get going with it?
Yeah, start to democratize experimentation across your organization. We've built our own generative AI studio, which allows access to the models we've approved for use in the phase of our creative process we allow them to be used for. And all 110,000 of our colleagues can now experiment. And we've created a playground. And that word play is critical because it's play and it's curiosity and it's testing the boundaries of where AI can work and where it reaches its limits and where we should and shouldn't use it in our life cycle. That's important because it takes away fear. It helps people understand how it can augment their roles. And thirdly, it helps us put the right appropriate guardrails around it once we understand how far our people want to take it.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you, Imran. Thank you.
Thank you. Wasn't that cool? Okay. Now, up until now, we've been unpacking the impact of generative AI on big picture industries like luxury and fashion and advertising. It's time for us to have a chat with top creatives who are using generative AI in their day-to-day work. For a very long time, it was thought that artistic and creative endeavors were untouchable by technological disruption. But with the advent of generative AI, this is no longer strictly true. We heard from Anca earlier, and I've heard it from so many creative people. Everyone who's creative needs to understand how these technologies will impact their jobs, how it can augment the work that they do. Kelly Wearstler is a prolific American designer whose work spans furniture, high-end residential, commercial, retail, and hospitality spaces. And Kelly and I have had the opportunity to get to know each other a little bit earlier this year. And I was in her LA studio, and we were taking a bit of a tour, and then she just showed me, she's like, oh, and this is some of the work we're doing with AI. And I said, wait. And as we started talking about it, on the spot, I asked her, please, can you talk about this at Voices? So over the past few months, we've been working together with Andrés Reisinger, an Argentinian digital artist based in Barcelona, whose dreamy virtual furniture designs and 3D visualizations have made him a sought-after collaborator for several global design-led companies and a collaborator for Kelly. So Kelly and Andrés are here to show us how they are using generative AI tools to augment their creative process at the very top of taste and sophistication. Please welcome Kelly Wearstler and Andrés Reisinger. All right.
Hi, you guys.
This is going to be so fun. You have no idea. Before we get into the experiments, I think we need to get to know each of your creative practices. But first, can you just tell us a little bit about how you two met? How did this creative collaboration come to life?
On a DM, Instagram.
Yeah, that's how it was.
Everything
and
happens
it's so
on
easy.
Instagram
It's
now,
so
right?
nice.
Yeah,
and
just send a DM.
You sent Kelly a DM?
Yeah, because I was following her work for a while, and she just was like very transparent, like, hey, I love your work. And she replied to me like a few hours ago.
I was following him already. and admirer of your work.
And then we started talking and then, hey, let's do something together. And from that point, we started collaborating in different projects, very experimental projects. From the very beginning, it was nothing like commercial or for a brand or client, but it was always like ongoing background explorations.
And it's interesting, too, to have two distinctive voices come together and cross-pollinate and to do something unique.
Absolutely. Okay, let's get to know each of your voices first before generative AI. And Kelly, I want to start with you. Let's get the, whoops. Can we go back one slide, please? There we go. All right. So Kelly, tell us about your work and what you do. Like if you meet someone at a party, how do you describe what you do?
Well, I'm a designer. We do architecture and interior design, and I have a 50-person studio, amazing, talented group of creatives, and we do architecture, interior design, digital design, furniture, curation, many different things. And so we, interior design was a broad, kind of the umbrella of the business, and just having an open heart, an open mind, like it expanded into so many different things. So we do luxury space, retail, and hospitality, and it is I'm so passionate about what I do, and I'm always about evolving and continuing to expand my horizons and running an efficient business and operation, having an amazing time doing it. Yeah, it's really a really exciting time in the studio as well.
We see like a little bit of your kind of aesthetic in this like incredible collage behind us. But if how do you describe the Kelly Wearstler look? Like what is it?
I would say it's evocative. Like it's an evocative style, and it's always evolving. It's always I'm always looking forward, being inspired by clients. We have the opportunity to work with so many incredible creatives, whether it's architecture, landscape, different brands. We collaborate with brands across fashion, lifestyle, and tech. And so just, working with them, telling their stories, and it's incredibly, exciting to tell someone else's story through my lens.
I mean, everyone who's seeing the images here, there's like a level of like sophistication and taste that really comes from a human, right? There's like a human element to it, which is why I think this whole AI conversation is so fascinating. You've also worked on projects with companies that have nothing to do with interior design or real estate. Like, tell us about what we're looking at now.
So, what's exciting about what I do is you never know who's going to reach out, and just like Andrés, in creating a relationship. And so GMC reached out, a car company. And they're launching the Hummer, this vehicle from the 80s. I think it was the 80s. And they are...
The gas-guzzling vehicle,
yes,
the Hummer.
Which is this massive, masculine, and they're calling me a feminine interior designer. And so they wanted to have us design into some sort of experience. And they were like, whatever you want to do, we're totally open. And so the team and I, we actually did this short film, and it's a true experience. And it's set in Joshua Tree in California. We designed the landscape, the mood, and the music. Everything was designed by us, and it was a really exciting project. And even on the interior, all the furniture and all the detailing was designed by the team and I.
And this is for the first EV Hummer. That's right.
Yes.
Right. So, and why do you think they came to you? You said for your feminine aesthetic. Like, why do you think that was what they were looking for this project?
Well, I think in terms of just marketing, being appealing to a broad, group of individuals. And they had LeBron James was one of the also collaborators involved. So I think having a nice mix of people, and also showcasing, like the Hummer, a car should be in some sort of garage or architecture, and it also needs a home, and it has a very stylish one.
Okay, so that gives us an introduction to some of your work, but I also want to understand the role of technology in your work pre-AI, because it's not like design even now, or a year ago before the kind of generative AI kind of revolution. You've always used technology in your process. How have you used technology up until now?
Well, this, what you're seeing on the screen now is a collection of works that we did for Design Miami, actually last year, and it's called the Nudo Collection. And so we started out, and this is kind of a basic process of how we work in the studio. We had a concept of a woven and knots, and how to turn that into furniture. The company we partnered with is a marble company. They're out of Mexico City, and they have quarries all across Europe. And we basically started with concept sketches, 3D modeling, which you saw in the prior slide. And then we did 3D model printing. We studied those. And then we, from that point, sent the files to Italy. A robotic arm actually carved everything, and we would get daily video of like the process, and it was so exciting. It's like something's weird's going on here. You have to tweak it, and then we, after the robotic arm did the carving, then a master craftsman would come in and then nuance all the details.
Okay, all right. So that's an introduction into the world of Kelly Wearstler. Andrés, you've always had technology as part of your creative process. Why don't you, to someone who's just not familiar with your work, we see this collage behind us. How do you describe your aesthetic and your process?
I'm actually, people know me as a digital artist, but actually it's more like a visual artist or a multidisciplinary artist, designer. I like the term unclassifiable because it's liberating, actually. I took it from Jorge Luis Borges, the Argentinian author, which was kind of the same way. And I find that term very liberating. It's like playing freedom. It's like really being in a digital playground, using it as a breeding ground where things pop. And I think nowadays, the linear storyline, it's increasingly fractured and has been fragmented many times. So I think it's a very interesting point in culture to express what I believe and what I see and feel through different mediums and different methods. So
talk us through your method. Like, what are we looking at now?
This is actually what I look at my daily basis when I'm in the studio. These are my screens. All the softwares that I use are digital tools. Most of them works with physical reactions as they work in reality, but they are simulated digitally, virtually. So what I kind of do is try to have this kind of reality, but it's kind of a little bit twisted. So everything looks real, but there's something that is off.
Okay. There's a lot of pink in your work. And we had the conversation about Barbie earlier. So I'm curious, tell me about pink. Why is pink so dominant?
Yeah. Pink is like my off-white. It's the color I usually start working with. It's like the baseline of my work, then I go down or I go up, and I try to stay in these kind of pink hues around all my work.
Why?
I don't know, I find it very nurturing. Like we have pink in our organs, and our lips, in our hands, in our... I find it kind of like in the same mood like being in the womb of my mother, It's like very nurturing. It's a place where you can actually feel very confident and explore new stuff.
Okay. Many people will have seen images of your work like this, and there's this kind of draping technique that you see on monuments and landmarks from all over the world. Tell us about how this became kind of what you were known for.
I actually had a huge interest in textile from a very early start of my career. So as you've seen, my Hortensia piece has been completely developed by a petal system created by textiles and ways of treating that textile to make it volumetric. So I think this series, which are called Takeover, was kind of trying to expand that journey with the textiles and the way I express with textiles in a more expressive way, rather than being so detailed and perfectly aligned with the design process. And what was very interesting about this process and this project was that it was a conversation with my audience. So at some point, millions of followers started asking me to take over their cities where they were living. And that was kind of like a shift in my mind. And I started to think, oh, okay, this is real, because many people started to comment my posts. Is this real? Where can I find it? Where are the streets are you doing this? And I was like, yeah, it is real, because any experience, it's real. Anything that can create an experience is real. So
if you feel it,
exactly,
it's real.
It doesn't matter if it's digital or physical. So customer experience, usually it's maybe 100% online, and it's a huge experience. So this went crazy, and when I started to take over a lot of cities, and people started to actually engage in this process and started to following me throughout the cities and trying to vote which city was going to take over and everything.
That's amazing. Okay, so now we've understood the world of Kelly Wearstler, the world of Andrés Reisinger, pre-AI. Now we want to reframe the creative process. We want to understand how a tool like generative AI can take your already incredibly creative output and, as we heard earlier, augment it, make it more efficient, create more options. So when you guys showed me this diagram on a Zoom call recently, I said, this is the killer chart. At McKinsey, we used to have killer charts. Can you explain to me, there's 3 phases here. There's one that's pre-AI, one that's with AI, and one that's with GPTs. Kelly, why don't you walk us through how this visual depicts the ways in which generative AI is changing the way you work?
So it was last November, and everyone was speaking about AI, and I was really intrigued, and I'm super, super curious. And I was like, this seems really cool, and I want to learn about it. And so listened to a ton of podcasts, read a ton of articles, and just educated myself on it over the holidays. And then I came back from break, and I was like super fired up. And I was like, we're going to like implement this in the studio. So
how did your studio react when you said that to them?
They were excited.
Yeah.
They were thrilled.
They weren't worried about their jobs.
No, because like you're still in charge. As a creative, it's like you have an assistant and you have another team. So they understood that, and So I selected like 3 departments that I thought would be a great case study. And we started actually with a new project we're working on in the studio, which is a hotel. And we actually are starting at concept. So we use like ChatGPT on helping us with verbiage and copy and part of that storytelling. And then we also implemented it in some projects that we are, in schematic design and design development on. And so it was, it's really exciting and continuing to evolve daily. I was telling Andrés, like, we have to like check the news today to make sure this isn't out of date.
Yeah. So, but pre-AI, that's each square there represents what?
So if you have a concept and an idea you're working on, that it helps to generate ideas. And so, for example, an easy way to describe is if you go into a library and there's like a vast amount of books, and you're scraping all the the information and imagery from like the wide source of books. That's AI, and sometimes it's like gambling. And it takes time. You could work on it for hours and net out nothing that's inspiring to you. Where GPT is going into the library and finding a book that's very specific to your needs.
Okay.
And that's how.
Kind of like having in the same library, you have pre-selected several books which are already highlighted by you and your team, for example. So it will go directly into the highlighted faces part.
So instead of scraping the entire internet and every image that exists, it's working off of a kind of curated data set that is in line with your aesthetic or your taste or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and even something that you are writing after reading those books.
Okay.
So
because it's not just that. So with AI, you can get so many more options, but then you have to edit all those options down. So with GPTs, you're getting better options that maybe require less editing.
Yeah. And we can also have a GPT model per project now. So we can educate it with the vibe of the project, and then we can use that per project instead of right now. It's just very like open, and that's what we're working on right now.
Okay, so let's put this into practice. This is a real life experiment example that you and Andrés have been working on since we started talking about this talk. It starts, Kelly, with something called the Hume bench. Tell us about this bench.
This is a bench that's part of my collection. It's a modular piece of furniture. It's made of stone. And Andrés and I were thinking of some fun exercise to present to the audience that would be compelling and engaging. And so we are taking the DNA of this Hume bench, and then we're going to put it into work across multiple categories. So we have a set design, fashion show. We also have a beauty product, a beauty brand, and then tech and recording studio.
Okay, so Mariam was talking earlier with Rachel about prompting. You, in order to do these experiments that we're going to see, you had to work with prompting, and the Hume bench was one of the main inputs into that prompt. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
How does that work, the prompting bit?
Well, it's text to image. Sometimes we'll blend images, so we would take this existing photo. There's many iterations of it, and then we would find another image. Maybe it's a stone, a marble that's in green, and we want to see many iterations of that. So sometimes we'll blend images, and then sometimes we'll blend images and then net out a really great one, and then we continue to prompt it until we finesse it and feel like it's at a good place.
Okay, let's see the results of the experiment. We're going to start with set design. So we saw Matteo Blasi's amazing Bottega Veneta set on the background before. Imagine, he didn't work with Gaetano Pesci, the architect. He was working with Kelly Wearstler and AI to think about a set design. Okay, so I'm going to share this with everyone now. This was the first step of the process, right? So these are the options that were generated.
Yeah, these are actually like a curation of maybe thousands of options, which we didn't like. So these are like a very small selection of them. And this is all like references. So because at least how we use AI at this moment is not to create final ideas or final designs or projects, but actually as to create our own references to start working with. And I think that's great because you can have your specific set of references instead of trying to look for them on history maybe in hundreds of years.
Okay. And then this is the one that you both selected. Like, so why this one? And what was the human involvement to get to this?
I think it's interesting how, or at least for me personally, how a very subtle detail and resource like this cutting out the piece of rock creates like a connection with the human bench without actually having all the other rounded corners and everything.
It doesn't have to be so literal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were trying to find and refine these AI to pick up on these specific subtleties, these specific sensibilities.
Okay. Let's look at the next experiment, which was in beauty. So you're using the Hume bench as an input to create what?
We looked at packaging of lipstick, compact, perfume. So these are a bunch of the studies, and we wanted to focus on stone and something that's very raw and textural, but also color. So this is where you see the DNA of the Hume bench, and there are some odd things like the flowers in this bottle, which is actually interesting. And that's the cool thing, is there are some happy accidents that happen that you weren't thinking of. That's like, wow, like that is unexpected. There are some things that are weird.
And usually they appear maybe because of a miscommunication with the machine. So in the way you are trying to conceive your message, the machine understood whatever else, and some flowers appear. But I think that's really nice, because usually when working with people, that miscommunication also exists. Yeah. And I think it's part of the creative process and the way we create new things.
And what I find interesting is it actually doesn't look at all like the fashion show set, but still has that DNA of the Hume bench.
And it's all about communication. It's like you give what you get. It's like any relationship. And you really have to be like specific. And if you're not specific, then it's not successful.
Yeah.
If you're not a good communicator.
Engineer job, which I think you heard it here first. That's the hottest job in the world right now, is prompt engineering. I wish it was a better, maybe prompt design or something design, but like, because it really takes, as we heard with Rachel and Mariam, it takes actually a taste level and understanding of design or photography or whatever in order to create amazing prompts. This is the beauty output you chose. Why did you choose this?
I mean, it looks good.
Yeah. Okay, last example, tech design. What was the brief here? What were you prompting in here?
This was a recording studio we're actually working on right now, a recording studio and looking at color. So this is like chartreuse and also timber as another, the materiality. And so some really interesting things came from this.
Yeah, and it's also interesting to see how far we can go until the DNA of the human is completely lost. And sometimes it's just a little detail that keeps you tired and running.
And even if you don't see the literal DNA of the human bench, it still feels like the world of Kelly Wearstler, maybe having a bit of a liaison with the world of Andrés Reisinger. You can feel it. And that's what creativity is about. And there's a feeling in it, which I just find... Okay, the last question, because we're already over time. Like, this is pretty incredible, but how long does it take, and how does it compare to like the regular process pre-AI? Like, in what ways is this helping you? You said you're running a business, right? Like, in what ways is this helping you with your work?
Well, it's really fast, and if we're studying architectural molding details on a project. It might have taken a junior designer, an intermediate designer, a week to produce really great digital references that are built in clay models and skinned in the materiality. And now it's like you can have 100 in like 30 minutes. So it's super, super fast. And it's going to also just get even, the returns are going to be so much better because you're going to have the GPT and a much more educated model. And so it's, and you're running a business, you only have a finite time to be creative. And if this is really affording us more options, then we're going to produce better results.
Okay, that was absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much. It just shows like AI isn't just for efficiency, it can also be for creativity. Thank you so much, Kelly. So we're going to shift gears a bit. This next AI innovation is just so incredibly important, and it touches upon some of the issues we were talking about earlier today. AI is big business, but who actually sees the benefit of that investment and growth? Cutting-edge AIs like ChatGPT work best in languages like English, where text and audio data is abundant online. This dynamic has created huge data sets, demand for data sets in countries where English isn't the dominant language. We heard about climate colonialism. What about AI colonialism? This signaled a key opportunity for wealth redistribution to some of the world's poorest communities for our next speaker. Manu Chopra is the founder of Karya, a nonprofit launched in 2021. Billed as the world's first ethical data company, Karya collects data sets of Indian languages that have so far been sidelined by the AI boom. In return, they offer workers an hourly wage of about $5, which is nearly 20 times the Indian minimum. For these people, this kind of cash injection can be life-changing. In August, Karya was featured on the cover of Time magazine. And a month later, Manu was selected for the magazine's annual list of the 100 most influential people in AI. He's on a mission to bring power, ownership, and agency back to the workers. Please welcome Manu Chopra.
Let's do this. So, if technology creation is purely driven by the market and we don't focus on existing social inequities, we will end up having amazing technological innovations that will leave the world an even more divided place. That is exactly what is happening today and what we need to fix. I grew up in one of the poorest parts of Delhi, a neighborhood called Shakur Basti. Growing up, I spent my afternoons dancing to Bollywood music and learning how to code in the community computer lab. Through a series of scholarships, I became the first person from my community to go to a college in the US. And in one generation, I went from Shakur Basti to Stanford. But my story is unfortunately not normal. India has 230 million poor people, more than any other country in the world. And for most of them, there is no pathway out of poverty. In fact, today, it takes an average poor person in India 7 generations of labor to make $1,500 in savings. Let's just sit with that for a second. That means that the average poor person in India has to work for 7 generations, 200 years, just to enter the middle class in India. This is obviously ridiculous and something that we need to fix. At the same time, that's me in one of the villages, and Karya, the company that I co-founded, the Sanskrit word for Karya means work that gives you a sense of dignity. a sense of purpose. And that's exactly what we do. We bring dignified digital work to rural Indians, helping build a pathway out of poverty that needs to exist today for hundreds of millions of people. At the same time, big tech companies like Microsoft and Google are spending over $100 billion a year collecting training data in global languages to build AI and ML models. Rural Indians do not have access to this work, and when this work does come to the global south, it comes in a very exploitative fashion. Across the data annotation industry, workers can get paid as low as 20 cents an hour. These are workers building data sets worth hundreds of dollars an hour in an industry worth billions of dollars. And despite that, they get paid as low as 20 cents an hour, and we saw this as an opportunity to bring this work and fix this unethical labor market and use this to build pathways out of poverty for rural Indians. At this point, at any presentation, the sense I get from the audience is, oh, he's very passionate about what he does, but what do they do exactly? And I want to make that very clear. So Microsoft, one of our very first client and one of our greatest supporters, let's say they want to build a computational language model in Marathi, one of India's 19,000 distinct languages. They reach out to Karya and say, hey, can you give me 1,000 hours of speech data in Marathi so I can teach my language model how to speak this language so I can serve the customers who speak this language. Karya takes Microsoft's big digital task and breaks it into micro tasks. We distribute these micro tasks to our workers in rural India via their smartphones. For the simple task of reading out sentences in their mother tongue, we are able to pay our workers 20 times the Indian minimum wage and 50 times the industry standard. Workers like Reshma. Reshma's community had no internet, and this was her very first time seeing a smartphone. Despite that, with just a few minutes of training, she was able to figure out how to use her new smartphone. Our high wage rate enabled Reshma to make more money in her first week at Karya than her family had made all of last year. And she became the first girl from her community to go to college. At Karya, we are reimagining how AI is built and hopefully showing to the world that a worker collective can actually do this. Our data sets are owned by our workers. What that means is every single time a data set is sold, our workers receive 100% of the client revenue as royalties that keep them out of poverty. We are built on 5 years of peer-reviewed research, lots of ethnographic work. Everything we do is open source, including our technology, and our work doesn't require our workers to have internet. Over the last year, over 40 million tasks have happened on our platform, which is exciting. And we now work with 35,000 workers across 22 states in India. Millions of rural Indians have now access to a smartphone, a bank account. And despite that, rural India remains among the world's poorest areas. AI and the AI revolution gives us a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to change that. Today, a Karya worker can reach that same $1,500 benchmark in less than 1 year. That means that we can take someone from extreme poverty to middle class in just a few months, just using the power of AI. At this point, I would love to tell you a story. When we go to a village, we knock doors. And I remember this clear as day, 5 years ago, knocking the doors in a village in western Rajasthan. And 60% of our workers are women, 95% come from historically marginalized communities. So I knocked the door, and this man opened the door, and I said, "Can I please see your wife? We have a job for her." In the most crass Hindi possible, he said, "My wife doesn't do work." And I'm not someone who loses my temper. And I retorted back, and he let me see her. And his last words to me were, "You can try, but she will not be able to do it." Obviously, he was wrong. In 2 weeks, she made more money than he had made all of last year. The next time I went to that same house, she opened the door. She was sitting on the sofa, both legs up, doing Karya work, and he was in the kitchen making chai. My co-founder, Vivek, who's an incredible technologist, has a favorite quote. Poverty is not a natural phenomenon. It's not a typhoon, it's not a cyclone. It does not just happen. It's a man-made disease. If there's a community that is poor, it's because someone somewhere has decided it is okay for them to be poor. When we redistribute wealth and we bring money to communities that have been intentionally kept away from that opportunity, we change who has power in society. And that's what we hope to use AI to do at Karya. Thankfully, we're not alone. There's so many good things that are happening, and it truly feels like we're living in a renaissance for AI for good. And I'm going to quickly mention 3 of my amazing friends doing 3 amazing things. There is Amrita from Arman, who's building a large language model to train healthcare workers to treat high-risk pregnancies in rural communities across the global south. There is Utsav from Rocket Learning, who is now working on building a chatbot that can tell parents how their kids are doing in public schools all over the world. There is Samin from Gramhal, who's using an AI-based WhatsApp chatbot to tell farmers which crop to sell, when to sell it, where to sell it, and increasing farmer incomes across the global south. All over the world, AI is fixing information asymmetry. And that's very, very exciting. That said, the last big technological wave was the internet. And the internet changed all of our lives. Well, it changed your life and it changed my life. But 30 years since the internet was created, even today, 2.9 billion people have no access to the internet. We simply cannot afford to make that same mistake with AI. We simply need to do better. And it heartens me that that process has started to happen today. We have to commit to use AI not just to innovate, but to inspire, not just to develop, but to dignify, and not just to advance our interests, but to amplify the voices of those we have left behind. Thank you.
So you see, it's not all doom and gloom. AI can do amazing things. And to prove that point, I want to invite Aza Raskin back on stage. In our opening talk, Aza laid out the push and pull of the AI dilemma. And he left with some warnings here last night that I know left a lot of you feeling slightly uncomfortable. But not only is Aza the co-founder of the Center for Humane Technology, he's also the co-founder of Earth Species Project. Aza is back now to share how machine learning can decode animal languages, something that Aza calls non-human languages. This could profoundly alter the human experience and the future of the ecological world forever. Please welcome Aza Raskin back to the Voices stage.
I guess I should start by saying that nothing that I said last time is going to be invalidated by this. But I feel like I have to have my one foot in something that I love and gives me hope, while the other foot, I try to see as clearly as possible, like what's going to happen so we can do something about it. And when I think about what is the structure of all of humanity's largest problems, whether it's the opioid epidemic, climate change, obesity epidemic, loneliness epidemic, mass inequality, like what is the structure of that thing that unites all of those? Well, I think it's a narrow optimization at the expense of the whole, right? And that's another way of saying disconnection from ourselves, from each other, and the natural world, where we're disconnected from the effects of what we're doing. And really, that's at the core of what Earth Species is about, which is, can we use AI to decode, translate the languages of other species? If you think about like most human myths, like they all start with like humans being able to speak with animals. And that moment when we cease to be able to communicate with the natural world, that symbolizes our disconnection from the natural world and from ourselves. And so there's sort of this hypothesis that maybe at the mythopoetic level, the stories we tell ourselves in order to live, maybe if we could see how the natural world is actually way more special and we are way more like it than we think, maybe that can start re-knitting the connection to solve that fundamental diagnosis. What animal this is? Not whale. Not penguin. I love that though. Sea lion? Very close. Yes, so very close. This is the bearded seal. The reason why I love starting here is it's just like when we think of animal sounds, maybe we think of like humpback whales, but like cats or something. This is the mating call of the bearded seal, which means if you got excited, now you know where to go. But the range of what's already known about animal communication is actually incredible. So just a couple, super fast fire. Off the coast of Norway every year, there's a group of false killer whales that all speak one way. There's a group of dolphins that all speak another way. And once a year, they come together and they hunt in a superpod. And when they do, they speak a third different thing, a kind of like interlingua. It turns out whales and dolphins have been communicating vocally for 34 million years, passing down cultures. There are only 5 animals that have menopause. 1, humans, 4, whales, all of those, the grandmothers are the culture carriers. So interlingua, I think that's sort of fascinating. Dolphins, it turns out, this was discovered in 2016, have names that they call each other by, even in the third person when the other one's not around. Parrots, turns out, do the same thing. And in fact, parents, like the mother parrot, will teach each of their offspring their own unique name. They will whisper in the parrot's ear until they get it, and they'll go to the next one of the whisper, and they will call them by name. So I just find so like profound. It always makes my hairs raise up, and I'm like, the natural world is like that, and we're just unaware, right? And even like, and we're talking today about animal communication and decoding animal language, but do you think, say, flowers and plants can hear? Obviously, it's a trick question. The answer is yes. But 2019, there's a University of Tel Aviv study where they played different flowers or different sounds to primrose flowers. And only when they played the sound of an approaching bee did the flowers produce more and sweeter nectar within around 3 seconds. That is quite literally the flowers heard the bee coming and got excited. And it turns out same group, stressed out plants, they would cut them or dehydrate them, some kind of plant torture. And it turns out plants emit sound at the level of human speaking, just up at 50 or 60 kilohertz where you can't hear. So now we have plants speaking and plants hearing, like the world is awash in meaning. We're just unable to perceive it. And when I think about the hope of AI, right, it's that AI can open the aperture of that which we can perceive. And of course, our ability to understand is limited by our ability to perceive, which is why, we haven't known of all the ways that nature communicates surrounding us. Okay, but let's get to the heart of the matter. Oh yeah, I should go here. This is my favorite graph. It is the most humble graph I know of because it includes only all of time and all of space. And I just like starting here because, like, look at human experience. And actually, this is drawn logarithmically, so it would be way smaller if it wasn't. Like, we can only perceive a tiny fraction of that which is there. Always makes me feel small in the very best possible way. But we're talking about translating animal language. Is there really a language there? This is a 1994 study from the University of Hawaii, and it sort of blew my mind. And in this study, they taught 2 different gestures to dolphins. The first gesture was do something you've never done before. That is, innovate. And it turns out dolphins can do this very abstract thing. And to do that, you have to remember everything you've done before that session. You have to understand the concept of negation, which is pretty complex. And then you have to say, not one of those things. Remember everything you've done before and then invent whole cloth something new. But the dolphins do. And then they teach a second gesture to the dolphins. Do something together. And they'll say to 2 different dolphins, do something you've never done before together. And the dolphins go down and exchange sonic information, and then come out and do the same thing that they've never done before at the same time, right? And so that doesn't prove that there's representational language, but I think it sort of put Occam's razor on the other foot. And you're like, I think we have to show how this isn't language. But of course, now if we want to get to decoding language, well, now we have to translate a language that doesn't have a Rosetta Stone. And how might you do that? And this was impossible. AI couldn't really translate languages if you didn't already have examples of translation until 2017. You'll remember from my slides last time, something happened in 2017. This was one of the things that happened. And what I really want to do for you today is you'll hear AI, but how does AI really work under the hood? So I want to take a little detour to give you all a conceptual understanding of how AI works so you can sort of think about it on your own. So the one thing that AI does, if you remember, is that it turns relationships into distance and direction. I'll describe what that means. So semantic relationships become geometric relationships. What you're looking at here is a set of data points that represents AI trained on many human faces. So imagine like a huge database, a flicker of all human faces, and AI has converted it into points in space. Every point is a face. Faces that look similar to each other are near each other, and then faces that share a relationship share a distance and direction. So let me give an example of what that means. In this shape, there's a point which represents this dude's face, and there's a different point which represents that dude's face, which is smiling. You take that distance and direction, and you add that to any other face, and you get the smiling version of that face. Right? So there's a direction for oldness, a direction for youngness, for more bangs, for more glasses, more hip, more hipster. Like it's all in there. Pretty cool. But this also works for everything. So let's take English. Like this shape also can represent, like English, the top 10,000 most spoken words, where every point represents a word and the distance and direction between them represents a relationship. So king, or man, is to king as woman is to queen. So if you take the distance direction from man to king and you add that to woman, it actually will equal queen. You add that same distance direction to girl in this shape and it'll equal princess. The very first thing I did when I got my hands on this data set was I was like, okay, hipster minus authenticity, whatever that relationship is, add it to conservative. You know what the computer spat out? Electability. Yeah. I'm not sure exactly what it means, but computers should not write better jokes than we can. Okay, so let's return for a second to this idea of how do you translate a language if you don't have any examples, if you don't have a Rosetta Stone? Well, think about the word dog. Dog has a relationship to friend, to guardian, to man, to wolf, to fur. And sort of, if you think about solving this multi-dimensional Sudoku puzzle of every concept to every other concept, well, dog ends up fixed in a point in space. Every word sort of gets fixed in a point in space. And you end up with this rigid structure that represents a language. Computer doesn't know what anything means, it just knows how they all relate. So you end up with a rigid shape that represents a language. And now you can ask the question, well, if I take the shape which is English and the shape which is Spanish, could they possibly be the same shape? And linguists would say absolutely not, but machine learners like, whatever, let's try, and it turns out they do. You can rotate one shape on top of the other, and even though there are words in Spanish that don't exist in English and vice versa, if you blur your eyes, the overall shapes are pretty much the same, and the point which is dog ends up in the same spot in both. Yeah. It's super profound. And you're like, okay, but yeah, English and Spanish are super related. So that's why. But you're like, let's try it with Japanese, works with Japanese. Let's try it with Finnish. Weird language, works with Finnish. Like Urdu, Aramaic, Esperanto, every human language, it turns out fits into a kind of universal meaning shape, which you think about like how divided the world is, the fact that there's a hidden underlying structure that unites us all, I just find so profoundly beautiful. And of course, the next question is like, can you build this for animal shapes and animal communications, and then can you match them up? That was like the core insight that said in 2017, let's start Earth Species Project, and let's see if we can go. But I actually want to bring you to the next step here, because it's deeper than just languages aligning. Because you could say, well, if we're going to try to translate animal language, their worlds are so different than ours, maybe we'll never be able to get like a translation. Like we all share the same physical hardware and the same sort of like rough cultural context. Do you guys want to know how DALL-E and all the image, like text to image stuff works? Yeah? Okay. Well, you build up the shape which represents language, already got that. We build up the shape which represents images. I showed you before what that looks like for faces, but you can do it for all images. You now have these two shapes. You then look at image caption pairs, and that lets you rotate these two shapes on top of each other. So now it's not quite a rotation, it's more of a squishing thing, but it's still, you're matching up these two shapes. And now you can translate between languages and images. So now I say portrait of Chile as a person, I get that spot in language space, I translate it over into image space, and say, computer, generate me the image that goes to that spot, and boom, I get out the answer. That's how these things work. It's not just that there's a hidden structure underlying language, there's a hidden structure underlying everything that AI is starting to pick up. Let's do another one. In this study, there's something really surprising that happened in 2013, which is the very same technology that lets you do art generation lets you read brains. Why? That seems super surprising, and now you'll have the answer, right? So in this study, they put human beings in fMRIs, they would show them images, so in this case, a giraffe. The computer would then learn how to associate the fMRI with the image the person was seeing. Then you would take away the giraffe, and you would just show the AI the fMRI. Just using fMRI, AI, can you generate what the human was seeing? And this is the answer. Like deeply surprising. Also, when you dream, your visual cortex runs in reverse, so your dreams are no longer safe. Sort of terrifying, especially with authoritarian governments. But it's scary to live in my brain. How does this work? Now you guys know. It's exactly the same way. You put all those fMRI stuff into any of these AI tools, it builds the shape which represents fMRIs, you pair that with the shape which represents images, you put in the fMRI space, and you get out the image. So pretty much now you start to see, every time you see a new demo, and you think, oh, this is a different demo, actually it's the same demo. You're just seeing the same AI just now combinatorically, and you begin to see why we're getting this explosion in AI and AI capabilities. This was my face when I first saw all of this, by the way. So what does that mean? That means, well, you can treat absolutely everything as a kind of language you can translate to and from. Images, videos, code. If you want to understand how ChatGPT lets you code by typing in text, it's this. You're just translating code into language, fMRI, motion, music. It's all the same thing. Everything can be treated as a language you can now translate to and from, and so you end up with this realization that everything that can be translated will be translated. Everything that can be decoded will be decoded. And that means, a lot of terrifying things, like if you can decode DNA and say, give me the point which is like polio, but make it like 10 times more viral, you can do that. Or you can translate animal language. So this is sort of where we're going. And we're like, it is now inevitable that we'll be able to translate whatever it is that animals are saying. But what are we going to discover? And do we think that anything could be actually translated back into the human experience? Sperm whales spend like 80% of their life a kilometer deep in complete darkness, seeing with sound. So like how much of that is shared? Like how much of these shapes, the human shape and the animal shapes might overlap. And I just want to give a couple examples of why we think there might be directly translatable experience. So these are dolphins looking in mirrors. There's actually, you can see this is one of the universal experiences across mammals, which if you give someone a mirror, they will definitely check out their abs. But there's a thing called the mirror test. In the mirror test, you paint a dot on an animal. They're unaware of the dot. They look in the mirror. If they see the dot in the mirror and they try to get it off them, you know that they've associated the image in the mirror with themselves. That is me. I have self-awareness. So if they communicate, they may well be communicating about a rich interiority, one of the deepest experiences and the basis, of course, of consciousness. So that is shared. Elephants passed this test. Actually, scientists thought for a while that elephants didn't pass the mirror test until they realized they were using a small mirror. And you're like, magpies do, one fish does, that we know of so far. Another shared experience is these are lemurs taking hits off of centipedes. So they will bite on a centipede, they will get super high, they go into these trance-like states, they get very cuddly. It's sort of like a proto-Burning Man. And it turns out many species will seek transcendent states of consciousness. Dolphins will intentionally inflate pufferfish, get around in a circle, get high off their venom, and literally pass them around. It's like puff, puff, pass, the original one. Chimps also will, they will spin. They'll hang on vines and spin to get high. So like, if animals are communicating, they may well be communicating about some of the most transcendent and profound experiences that conscious beings may have. Pilot whales will carry their dead young for like up to 3 weeks. Orangutans will watch magic shows and will fall over laughing when magicians do simple things. And I really think this indicates one other shared part of our experience with other animals, which is a shared hatred of magicians. And here's the thing, I don't know which part of this is going to be more fascinating. The part of animal communication we can directly translate into human experience, or the part we can't, right? Like I return to this idea that whales and dolphins have been communicating vocally for 34 million years, passing down culture, right? And that which is oldest correlates with that which is wisest. They're not the same, but for something to have survived for 34 million years of cultural evolution, there has to be something deeply true in there. And whatever it is that is the solution to our problems, I would argue it's not in our imagination. Because if it was in human imagination, we'd probably be doing it. So what we're looking for are things that are outside the sphere of human imagination, like wisdom for 34 million years. Like that gets me excited. People always ask, but what do you want to say to the whales? And that's the wrong question. It's not what we want to say, it's what do we want to listen to? What do we want to hear? We do not change when we speak, we change when we listen. All right, what species makes this sound? Any guesses? No? These are beluga. And what's amazing to me is this sounds like an alien modem. Dolphins, when they say their name, it sounds like it's like a sine wave sort of thing. Belugas speak in these modem-like packets and then code not just their name, but their clan identity. And the stat that blew my mind, one of our partners, Dr. Valeria Vergara, said, even though she has tags that sit on whales, that record audio and motion and video, she has to throw away 97% of her data because she can't tell who's speaking or they're overlapping. And so just think about that. The most vocal underwater species, the supermajority of the data has never been analyzed by Western science. Like that is where you get sort of like the next frontier. But of course, to do that, you have to be able to do things like listen to multiple animals speaking at once and use AI to separate them out into their own tracks. So we have an early version of that working. As our first paper is in Scientific Reports Nature, us being able to do that. And where we're going from here is back to this idea of multimodal translation to and from things. You can now imagine, as we start to get data where it has like motion from an animal, from an entire pod of an animal, and everything they say, and the context of what's going around them, we can translate to and from there. So you'd be like, cool, what do one whale say to another whale to cause that whale to dive? We don't know exactly what that means. It might mean there's danger up here or there's food down there, but it causes the behavior of diving. Two elephants coming together. What do they say? Generate me that audio. Now generate that audio when one of them is running really fast and the other is flapping its ears. You see that its ability to translate to and from multiple modalities gives you a laboratory to very quickly start to get to decoding. And then you couple that with the ability to map languages together, and we're starting to get a very rich palette of tools to understand sort of like the inner workings of other minds. I think of language as sort of the crystallized shadow of mind. We just published a paper in Science with some collaborators on exactly this roadmap, which is super exciting. I want to just get to like the final sort of bit, which is we've been talking about decoding, and we are now at the cusp, too, of being able to break the two-way communication barrier and communicate back, which, as I'll talk about, has both exciting parts and some challenges. I just want to tell like one quick story before the growth to the finale, which is we went out 2 years ago with some scientists to try doing playback experiments. Could we say hello to a humpback whale, and would it say hello back? Do you guys want to know how to say hello in humpback whale? All right. I use my hand, you don't have to, but it sounds a little bit like boop. Yeah? Oh, this makes me so happy. And we're out there. This is actually the day of the experiment. It was a super bright day. This is in Alaska. It's foggy, but the sun is super bright, and so like birds are flying out of this white mist from nowhere to nowhere, and you can hear the humpbacks breathing. You can't see them. They sound sort of like Darth Vader doing yoga. They sound like... And we start the experiment. We had recorded audio from the day before, and as soon as the experiment starts, this humpback whale lurches at the boat with its mouth half open from maybe like 30 meters away. And we're like, we've never seen that behavior before. And every couple of like 30 seconds from another direction, the humpback would come, and the humpback would come. Experiment ended, and it just beelined out. And we went downstairs, asked the scientists, like, what were you playing? And it turned out that we had played a humpback's own hello back to itself. This humpback, human name for it was Twain. You can hear on the recording, because our speaker's sort of small, like our speaker going, I'm Twain. And then the humpback going, I'm Twain, I'm Twain, I'm Twain. And can you imagine how actually psychedelic that must have been for a whale to like encounter itself after 38 years? And I'm actually not sure that that was a great experiment to have run. Like, I don't think we should be out in the wild trying to do playback experiments. It's like a learning actually from working with these other scientists. But we're at this cusp, because that's sort of like speak and spell style technology, where you get to like record and then say something back. We want to get to full fluent conversation. And so just like you can now build a language model on top of human data and have something with 3 seconds of anyone's voice, continue speaking of their voice, we can now do that with animals. So our first experiment next year is going to be in captivity, working with songbirds, where we've built a AI that can speak and pass, we hope, the Turing test of these songbirds, these zebrafinch. And here's just a quick example of it. We're hearing about prompt generation and like prompt engineering. This is that, but in animals. So the first bit was real, and the second bit was synthetic. Here's same thing for humpback whales. You'll actually get to hear the hello here. And this really means in the next, like 12, 48, 36 months, something there, we will be able to start crossing the two-way communication barrier. And we have to be very careful, right? Because humpback song goes viral. For whatever reason, humpbacks are like the K-pop singers of the underwater world, especially the Australian ones. And when they create a song, that song will get picked up sometimes, you don't know why, and go viral and be sung by the entire world population within within a season or two. So if we're not careful and we just create a synthetic whale that sings, right, we may create a viral meme, a kind of like a whale QAnon? We don't know. So we need to be really careful. And actually, this is important because what Earth Species is all about is a change in our relationship with the rest of nature. And to show up to this responsibility is to begin changing our relationship with the rest of nature. To take seriously 34 million-year-old cultures and not disrupt them is to begin our transformation. And so we've actually already started to work towards like new ethical norms, the Prime Directive, cross-species, like a Geneva Convention on cross-species communication, so that before the technology is out, we can have the appropriate safeguards in place, only do these kinds of experiments in non-wild populations until we understand what we are saying. I think then, to end, like I just imagine like what kinds of profound implications this can have culturally, right? Like, you guys probably, many of you have seen My Octopus Teacher, right? And you know how many people now say like, I do not eat octopus because I've seen how intelligent they are. Imagine charting these two-way communication iconic moments. Like if the world really knew that animals had names they called each other by, how profound that would be in shifting human behavior, human identity. It's like My Octopus Teacher, but 10,000 times bigger. And then you use that to drive real political change, rights for nature, personhood for non-animals, greater marine protected zones, like changes in animal farming. Like that is the goal. It's not the science only. It is the profound change in how we human beings think of ourselves. I always come back to this like photo, the Hubble Deep Space photo, where scientists pointed the Hubble at an empty patch in sky, and what they found were the most number of galaxies that had ever been seen in one spot, right? Like you point a new tool at empty space, and what you discover is everything. And so my hope then is just like with the telescope, that AI will be the telescope of our era, expand our ability to perceive. When we looked out with the telescope, what we discovered was that Earth was not the center. What I hope now is that we'll look out at the patterns of the universe, and what we'll discover is humanity is not the center. And that is the shift, the break in human ego that I think we need in order to be able to survive. So, thank you guys so much.
I told you it was mind-blowing, this session. This is going to be so fun. Okay. Born in Lahore, Pakistan, our next guest is a musical virtuoso whose voice weaves through a rich tapestry of classical, folk, and contemporary genres. Trained in the classical Hindustani music tradition and blending elements of electronica, Ali Sethi brings unique depth and complexity to his performances. His song, who knows the song Pasuri? Raise your hand. Any brown person in the room is going to raise their hand. It's been streamed over 1 billion times and is the first Pakistani song to hit #1 on Spotify's global viral chart. And it was also Google's most hummed song in the world in 2022. Take a look at this. So much to my partner Nick Hill's dismay, that song has just been playing on it ever since I started talking to Ali about this this talk. I've just been playing it over and over, and I've been singing it all the time. And I don't speak Punjabi, so I'm like making up the words. But now I feel okay about it because clearly people were humming it. They didn't know what the words were either, but they were just trying to figure out like how do I get this song. And last Sunday, on November 19th, I went to see Ali in concert. And for those of us with South Asian heritage, sadly, history divided us. There was partition. We talked a lot about colonialism today, but actually, like, brown people from the subcontinent are all the same people. And what was so amazing about Ali's concert is everybody was there. You know, and he did a call out to the people from Delhi and the people from Lahore and the people all across South Asia. And there were Sikhs in turbans, and there were women wearing the hijab, and there were Muslims and Hindus. And it was a song that the reason it's become so viral is because it brought people together across all of these divisions that were left behind by colonialism. And it's amazing. So Ali is here to speak on the past, present, and future of music and treat us to a short performance that will use AI to reinterpret the ancient algorithms of South Asian music, melodies, and rhythms. Please join me in welcoming Ali Sethi to the room.
Keep it short and then you'll talk to me. Thank you, Imran. Delighted to be here and to talk about hummability, tune making, melodic cultures, and what the future might hold for those of us who do these things. I grew up in Lahore, an ancient city in present-day Pakistan. That was a confluence for many, many centuries between cultures. Persian culture, Turkic culture, Vedic culture, Greco-Bactrian culture, Gandharan Buddhist culture, British culture, Sikh culture. Lots of cultures emerged in my home city. By the time I came around and started to kind of listen to music, I was picking up all these different strains, cultural strains, languages, rhythms, inflections in the music I heard. Our traditional music, you could hear it at Sufi shrines. You would hear it in the hymns and dirges that people performed during religious rituals and ceremonies. You even heard it in the super jingoistic, nationalistic, patriotic songs that sometimes broke out during wars with our neighbors. And if I ever asked my grandmother, I said, oh, what is this music, this delicious music in which people can freely intone and use their voices to make all these delicious tunes and melodies that just sort of catch you and grab you and that you keep humming afterwards? She would say, oh, this is rag music. She would say, these are rags. What is a rag? A rag is a melodic framework, broadly defined. And when I apprenticed myself to a great master of rag music in Lahore, Ustad Sami, I went to him and I said, I want to learn rag music. I want to know how to make tunes and melodies in this style. And he said to me, bring me a keyboard. And I brought him a keyboard. And he said, the first thing is that this is wrong. He comes from a very prestigious and important lineage. His family have been traditional qawwals, performing the devotional genre of qawwali for 800 years. There's an actual family tree that goes all the way back to the 12th century in Delhi. During the partition of India and Pakistan, his family were refugees. They migrated to what is Pakistan now. And he is a real repository of this pre-colonial culture. He said, what is a note? I said, this is a note. He said, yeah, play me these notes in succession. He gave me a set of notes. I played them. He said, this is not a rag. These are just some notes. What are the divisions between these notes? What are the relationships between these notes? How might we enact those relationships with our voices? And then he began to do what I later realized. He began to sing with microtones, which are not really contained in these keyboards. Any instrument with keys necessarily divides the notes into flat and sharp divisions, right? If anybody plays a piano here, you'll know this. So he made me do this again. He said, that is what this Western instrument is capable of, right? This standardized thing that insists on these binary divisions, on these neatly delineated divisions. And what we can do with our voice is going to be different. So I spent many years exploring the possible relationships between notes with him, and I think we should try to do it together a little bit right now. It's the end of the day, we might as well. Very nice. Beautiful. Then he said, Arabic maqam, where some of this music comes from, our music, because it's anciently multicultural, uses an extra fluid inflection. He said, have you heard flamenco? I said, of course I've heard flamenco. And he said, flamenco music is also related to Indian, Arabic, Spanish. It's a confluence of musics, of cultures. He made me do these things with my voice. And he said, then Punjabi Bhangra, which is the folk music of our towns and villages here, using the same notes, quote unquote. So I spent so much of my time kind of exploring the fluidity and the extremely subjective, not quite notatable nature of music with my guru, with my teacher. I was introduced to a host of concepts of mean, which is the glide that measures the space between notes, of the murki, which is like a ululation, like a little trill, a way of using your voice to express excitement, and all sorts of other categories. A note that is andolan, same root as undulate. A note that is deliberately not stable, that kind of glides between two spaces. There are entire raga recitals that sort of hinge on a single undulation. And you have to have a lot of breath to kind of undulate in that sound correct way, which is never quite locatable on a keyboard. As I was learning this music, I was living, as Imran mentioned, in a post-colonial context, constantly subject to nationalism in the region. The war on terror was going on. These questions of what is Pakistani identity? Who are we really? Are we fundamentalist or are we modern? Yet still more binaries. And learning all of this music was a real sort of tonic, a source of release for me, because I could find that I could be relaxed in all my identities as I dwelled in this music. I was soon also finding myself making melodies using some of these phrases. And one of the things that struck me that I felt was extremely beautiful was how kind of algorithmic this art is of raga melody generation. By algorithmic, I mean just that you are given a set of laws, governing laws, and then you're expected to generate novel-seeming phrases inside that framework, right? There's a kind of illusion, a chimerical situation where you're experiencing novelty and sameness at the same time. Yeah. So in these same phrases, in these same notes, I'm going to sing one phrase from a devotional genre. My bracelet falls down. The maiden says, my bracelet falls down. Okay, open to interpretation, whatever that means. I'm so in love that my blood is rushing through my veins, and I'm so fevered right now that my bracelets keep falling down, and then I have to go down to pick them up. 18th century erotic text. Yeah, it actually is. And we sort of sing it as though it means the world to us right now, in the course of our apprenticeship. Same phrase, sing it in all kinds of, at least in 4 different ways. And I would have to then become the maiden and sing it in 4 kinds of different ways. Depending on what you elongate, what you leave out, your elisions, your commitments, where you express your emotion, where your voice cracks, all of that becomes a part of the text. It becomes a part of the recital. The nature of this classical music is in its subjectivity, in the experience that you, as a body, as a spirit, as an entity subject to political forces, everything that you bring to it becomes a part of the music, right? Fast forward to 2020. I am in New York City on my way to becoming a US citizen. And of course, the lockdown happens. We are all locked down. And in my state of isolation, I'm trying to write a song. I hear reggaeton beats on the streets of New York City. And I think, that sounds kind of like Punjabi Bhangra. It has the same kind of the it's kind of analogous to okay. I'm also hearing these melodies that are connected to flamenco, right? I'm listening to Bad Bunny, I'm listening to Rosalia, and I'm reminded of the maiden, falling down and picking up her bracelet, and I'm thinking there's a connection there, connecting those things. I'm thinking of isolation, and I'm thinking of it as a metaphor for the relationship between India and Pakistan at this moment, where I, as a Pakistani artist, cannot travel to India anymore because of the tense relations between the two countries, even though my biggest audience is in India. I'm thinking of the injustice of that, the tragedy of that, the irony of that, the poetry of that, right? And all of those things combine to make this melody that I then make. And this melody that I think you saw a glimpse of now, and I might perform later tonight, is totally written by me, in that state, in that place, tapping into all of these elements. We made a video for it that has been loved by a lot of people, that is kind of polyvalent, that enacts a syncretic space where you have all these different cultural elements that I refer to, and that enacts fluidity at many different levels, through song, through dance, through bodies, through beauty standards, through ideas of nation, through ideas of community. A broad church in the broadest possible sense. It was extraordinary to me that at a time of increased tribalism, increased polarization, where nationalisms and chauvinisms are back in fashion, a song like mine could become a safe space where young South Asians from across categories of difference could congregate, could connect, could share, could communicate, could vibe together, could dance together. That has been my process lately. I have used contemporary tools, music making tools, softwares, as they have come to my attention, very open to them. And only recently I encountered in Brighton last week, while working with a music producer called Liam Noonan, a tool called Suno, which asks you to you can give it prompts and ask it to make a song. I gave it the same prompt I gave myself in 2020, right? And the prompt I'd given myself was, let's make a song that combines flamenco, raga, qawwali, which is the sacred music of my home city, reggaeton, and does it in a B minor scale. Yeah. Can we hear what it gave back?
A fusion of melodies, a musical schism. Kawali chants, reggaeton beats, flamenco guitars, ragas mystique, a harmony of cultures, a tapestry of sound. Kawali reggaeton, flamenco raga, expressions of emotions, vibrant and saga. From the streets of Havana, through Seville's alleys to the Ganges retreat. Kawali reggaeton, flamenco raga. Music unites the world, oh what a saga.
Wow, wow, wow. It knows, and it's alive. It's coming, it's here. But I think back again to my guru and what he said to me, which is, does it have pathos? Does it love? Is it subject to tyrannies? Is the music coming from those places? We will find out. For now, I'm going to use that tune and that melody for my next creation. The tin, 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 that's a beat I would not have thought of. It suggested that to me. And I think even the melody that it's suggesting to me is kind of interesting. If it ever becomes me, replaces me, I hope I get paid for it. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Do you guys want to hear Pasuri?
Yes.
Tonight in the mill room, we're gonna do a little impromptu moment. Ali, thank you for doing that. That was like a wonderful way to end the day.
Thank you.
I'm so inspired by you. It's so nice. We just met like in September, New York Fashion Week. Had dinner with Ali and his partner, and I love how, and actually Ali was recommended or introduced to me by a former Voices speaker, Mohsin Zaidi. And that's the magic of Voices. I just keep getting to meet amazing people, and we bring them all here on this stage. So thank you for closing today.
Thank you so much.
We will meet with Ali later tonight. Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Okay, so AI ain't all bad. It can do magical things. It can be creative. It can solve problems. It could potentially solve major problems in the world, like poverty. It could do things we never imagined we thought were possible, like decode non-human communication. And it could potentially help make music. Wow. That's it for today's talks. We will be back tomorrow morning at 10:30 a.m. London time with our deep dive into global culture and creativity. And let me tell you, it's amazing. It's going to be great. Before we go, a big thank you to our partners, Snap, McKinsey, Porsche, Amazon Fashion, Invisible Collection. Thanks to all of you for tuning in to Voices 2023. We'll see you tomorrow. So long from here at the Voices Amphitheatre in Oxfordshire. Bye-bye.